Hey everyone, for those of you that haven't met Floyd yet, this is Floyd with A to Z Home Inspections. Floyd, say hi to the people.
Hi guys.
I'm sure many of you do know Floyd. A to Z has been a preferred supplier with CR Realty for a very long time. A ton of our agents use you guys, and you guys have been so supportive to our culture as far as events and professional development goes. So this is just another example of that. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you.
So the conversation today, we're going to start off with preserved wood foundations.
There we go.
And let's just jump right into it here, because we got a lot of questions. And it's funny because even last week, Chloe came running in this morning and she's like, I got 2 more questions for you. So we're going to add those in. When did they start building with preserved wood foundations?
Yes.
Like, is this how old is this, or tell us a little bit about that.
Good question. Very good question. First, I'm a professional home inspector. I'm not an authority per se on.
Not an engineer.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you my perspective from the home inspection industry. So mid-70s is when they first started using preserved wood foundations here in Alberta. Actually, to my understanding, it's just the prairie provinces that have preserved wood foundations.
Really?
So Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Like Quebec and some of the other areas that are really wet, to the best of my knowledge, they don't permit them in those areas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see if that changes as we go forward because of the climate change as well.
Oh, yeah, I guess, eh?
Yeah,
I
so
don't really think about that.
So mid-70s, 1974 is the oldest one I've seen, still functioning, still working well. To you know, what was exposed and what we had access to, because yeah, you'll probably get some other questions there.
Yeah. It's 45 years.
That's it.
Yeah.
45 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Are they still building?
They are. They are. In fact, one of my friends out there, give a shout to Tom Waterhouse and his wife Krista.
Yeah.
They built one just, I think, I'm going to say about 4 years ago, something like that. Huh. And so yeah, so the advantages, some of the advantages to that system, it's quicker, cheaper, and warmer. Most people don't realize they're actually full of insulation, those walls. And so those are the advantages to a foundation like that. And some people really like them. Everybody's different, right? So there's pros and cons to all of them.
So what is the life expectancy of a preserved wood foundation? Great
question. It's a great question because it's a question that comes up all the time. And I just shared with you one I'm aware of that's 45 years old, still performing as intended. If you Google it, you'll probably find anywhere from 25 to 80 years is the range from which you can find estimates, which is a huge range. So
I would say so.
I mean, so here's one's 45. It's already outdone the 25. I probably should back up just a little bit and maybe talk just a little bit about the different styles of preserved wood foundation. For example, you can have just one without a membrane, and you can have one with a membrane. And the type of membrane that's used is also important as well. So the cheaper ones don't have any membrane at all. So in other words, it's just preserved wood with soil right up against it. And they tar essentially the joints. We'll see a lot, even in the 70s and 80s, where they used polyethylene or just a plastic membrane on the outside. And again, they seal those up with tar. Those I have found tend to be better. And they probably will have a longer life.
Right.
Some of the problems with that particular system is that where it comes above grade, there's essentially an 8-inch piece of preserved wood plywood tacked along the side to protect the polyethylene, the plastic, from the ultraviolet sunlight breaking it down.
Right. And
you'll always find that along that edge between the dirt and that piece of wood where the sun has broken it down if it has access to it, and that's a water entry point. So that's something that if you have one, or if you're looking at one very closely, certainly from our perspective, that's what we have to do. But from a realtor's perspective, if you're concerned about that, you might want to look in those areas and see if there's that membrane's there, and if so, if it's damaged already, because water intrusion is one of the worst enemies of the home, right? So
interesting.
Yeah. Are there, kind of common question for realtors, concrete versus which have more problems, least problems? Should you be petrified when you walk in the door and see a wood foundation versus?
That's preserved, not petrified.
I'm
just kidding.
Did I say petrified?
No, you did. You were talking about being afraid.
Yeah. Again, really, really good question. No matter what foundation system you're going to have, there's always a lot of potential for problems. If you don't want problems with water ingress, then build slab on grade. If we were all down wherever in California or somewhere like that, we wouldn't have foundations. The fact is we have a lot of frost, it goes down deep, and we want to use that space, so we create what we call basements. So concrete, the majority of concrete foundations have cracks. We don't cure them properly, we don't allow them to cure properly. It's just the way we build things now in our culture, in our society. So they inevitably shrinkage cracks, transition points, beam pockets, and again, those are water ingress points. So concrete block, the same thing. I know, for example, in Quebec, once again, they don't even allow them in some of the municipalities because of the soil movement. So no matter which foundation system you have, there's always a potential for problems. And if you want to prevent or be proactive, and that's why you'll see on home inspectors' reports over and over again, is manage the water around the house.
Slope it away. Keep your eaves flowing away.
Because if your soil is sloping away and your downspouts from the roof are discharging water away, you're reducing the possibility for water ingress into your basement system. Right?
You know that spot we have at our house? Are you thinking about that right now?
I know. I know.
So to answer your question, yeah, the general public has a real fear about those types of foundations, the preserved wood, the PWF. Some people have had some real bad problems with them.
Yeah.
I've seen all kinds of problems with all kinds of different foundations.
Yeah, so concrete, there's problems with concrete as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no need to be unnecessarily afraid.
That's right. So, yeah, so some of those, well, I won't go into too much detail on the concrete ones, but believe me, there are some serious problems with some of the, you don't have to go far to find problems with any of the foundation systems. Let me ask
a question, then we're going to ask a couple things about engineer reports here. Tell me about, so it's let's say the wood foundation actually has a 25-year life. How do they fix it / replace it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess depending on the severity of the damage, if it had to be completely replaced, that would be, well, I suppose in one sense, inevitably that will happen, right?
Yeah, like you're just digging around the whole thing?
Yeah, well, typically they would punch holes in the foundation, put steel beams across, lift it up, and that's typically how they would replace that.
Right.
So, not all, but the majority of those foundations, the vertical wall goes down. So the vertical wall goes down, which is your studs, and those at the bottom, there's a 3 to 4 inch concrete floor that prevents that wall from pushing in at the bottom.
Right.
So the floor prevents the pushing in, and at the top you have your floor joist system. But so if you lifted the house up, you would still have your floor slab, and then you'd have to dig around it and then come off the footing from there.
Right.
Yeah. So it certainly can be done.
I mean, if you had to replace a concrete one, you'd have to do a similar process.
You would. I've seen it more with well, yeah, actually pump jacking. We've seen footings that have collapsed, and usually they underpin them. There's helicoil. There's different systems to do that with. And that could also happen with a preserved wood. You know, the soil gives away, water change. There are different things that come into place. But there are ways to correct that, depending how severe the damage is.
Yeah.
That will depend upon the approach that's taken.
Wow.
So what if you were to say the top? 3 might be too many, but the top. Well, let's say 3. See if you can go with 3. Top 3 problems with preserved wood foundations. Okay. Right off the bat, like somebody says, what are the things I should be looking out for? These are them. Yeah.
Well, one we sort of mentioned already. Well, we did, and that is if it has a membrane, the damaged membrane at the surface. That's very, very common. 2, because they're not built to withstand as much pressure. I get to see problems, particularly in the country, where, for example, it can even be in the city. Say you build a driveway right against the foundation of the house, over time, I've seen where that, that pressure from the vehicles on that driveway would push the wall of the foundation.
Interesting. Yes, because you drive up, you stop, it slides forward.
And this is the time of year you'd really get that when the soil's really soft, right, and the frost is coming out. I've been in houses where I remember this older couple that was there like 30 years or so, and they weren't aware that below the window it bowed in significantly to the point where they shouldn't really be occupying the house. It was bowed in that bad. Pushed the bed right out from the wall, and they just didn't use that room at all. Or they're always upstairs. They were older. They didn't go downstairs hardly at all. So to put that in perspective, the preserved wood foundations are weak, if they're going to be weak, around protrusions in the wall, which are your windows and doors. Right. So they have to be reinforced in those areas, and sometimes they're not reinforced as much as they should be, and that's a natural bowing point or a stress point, which leads to a problem.
So how does a realtor find out that a foundation is preserved wood or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've had that question quite a few times. Unfortunately, I've had realtors got their client right to the point of buying the house only to find out the inspector tells them it's preserved wood, and now they've had a bad experience, or they've just, and they just walk away right away.
That's right.
As mentioned before, walk around the perimeter of the house, look for, if you see a horizontal 6-inch or 8-inch piece of preserved wood, it's usually green in color, can be brown. That's an indication. One of the best things you can do is just simply take your car keys or a screwdriver or something and tap on the foundation. It's going to sound hollow. And if you tap on perhaps the neighbors, the concrete, or just tap on concrete, the driveway, you'll see a significant difference. If it sounds the same as the driveway, it's probably concrete. If it sounds hollow, your antenna should go up. If you have opportunity, look underneath the, for example, if it has a porch, look underneath the porch, or stairs, look underneath the stairs, because oftentimes that's where you'll see the full preserved wood, or the polyethylene or the membrane that's covering that preserved wood. And then, so those are areas you're looking for outside. If you go inside, you're looking for any unfinished area within the basement. And utility rooms are the most common.
Utility room,
yeah, or sometimes there's a panel box or a shut-off valve for water in a different location where you'll actually see your polyethylene vapor barrier, your insulation, and your studs. And then, a home inspector, if all that's all closed in, and it's all closed in outside as well, even though your antenna's up because you hit that and it sounds hollow, then what a home inspector would do is remove a cover plate off an electrical receptacle and just stick a wire in there. And if it only goes an inch or two, and hits solid concrete, well, you know right away it's concrete.
Yes.
But if it goes in 8-10 inches, you now have a preserved wood foundation. So there's ways to determine that. Now, a realtor probably won't go to that extent.
Yes.
But those are the ways that we would approach PWF.
Quickly talk about engineering reports. Do you need one?
Good question. Yeah, so typically, whenever you submit plans to, say, the City of Calgary, or if you're in Cochrane, or Okotoks, or wherever you are, High River, you have to submit your plans to the city for approval. And when you're dealing with structure, when you're dealing with any structure, you're supposed to have an engineer's approval or stamp on that, the blueprints. And the city will approve or not approve based on those, those blueprints with the proper designations that follow that. So just getting to, home inspectors want to know and want to protect their clients, and will ask if you have that engineer's report. So for a realtor, that can be frustrating. I mean, it's not very often. My wife might have that on file, but a lot of people aren't that well organized. You would typically go to the city or municipality of which that home is registered under, and you would inquire there for a copy of that engineer's approval for the foundation.
Got it.
Okay.
I don't know if I can ask this question.
You can ask anything.
You can just say, but you can say, I'm not answering that question.
I'm not answering that question.
Would you might not want to answer it. Would buying a home with a preserved wood foundation deter you personally after everything you've seen?
Well,
Am I not allowed to ask these questions?
Well, you can ask anything, but you have to understand that my background, there's very little that scares me that I see out there and I've done, I'm pushing 10,000 home inspections in this area.
Wow,
so,
10,000.
Yeah, so
That's amazing.
so I don't get too scared because I know if there is a problem with it, it can be fixed.
That's a great attitude.
Yeah, so I'm not too fearful. I understand the fear that's out there, and I understand people have had, problems.
Yeah.
I think Tom even had a problem with one of the ones he had before it leaked. But you're going to ask Tom Waterhouse about that, okay?
Yeah, we will. And then last question on this one. So the basement's finished. How do you get an engineer's report after the fact?
Yeah, once again, well, I mean, you can, there are engineers out there. I've been in situations where I've had to call upon an engineer because I think of this one I did in the country, and it was bowed in so bad, and the engineer came out and he had him rip off all the drywall, and sure enough, they were buckled in the middle. So he prescribed a repair for it.
Yep.
They repaired it, and they put it all back together, and it was that simple. Okay.
Got it.
So don't let it deter you if you have one and you're trying to sell it and you're having difficulty. It will sell and it can sell, and you just have to line yourself up with the right people to get to that point. But once again, it should be registered. The initial engineer's approval for that should be registered with the municipality of which the home was registered under.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Great.
Okay.
So we have one last question for you here. This was not about preserved wood foundations, but just kind of in general, a couple minutes on preparing your home for a home inspection. Realtors out there, they know that this is about to happen to their clients.
Their sellers, from a seller's perspective.
Yeah, what's a little bit of advice they can give their sellers?
Well, that's a really good question. We can talk a long time on that one. But just some basic things.
Let me get a cup of coffee.
Just from a home inspector's perspective, okay, so if I quoted the standards of practice, which I brought with me rather, and we don't have time, but a home inspector is not required to move personal items or anything, or turn on shut-off valves, or turn on a system that's not turned on. They're not responsible to do that, and the reason for that is if they cause problems, they're now liable. So they're not trying to get out of doing what the expectations of the person who hired them to do, but they're just trying to avoid problems.
Yeah.
So making sure that the systems are up and running, or that they're operable, and that we don't have to fire up a system and turn on valves and all kinds of crazy things. It just leads to trouble. So access to the furnace, the utility room, the electrical panels, attic access hatches. Make sure the rooms are not locked. Trying to make sure if there's an inspection coming that you don't have animals on the property.
Yeah.
Preferably. I remember chasing a cat. We were all chasing a cat down the street. It was.
Yeah.
So someone watched it would have been funny, but for us it wasn't. Or a dog barking the whole time you're there. Just cleaning up the dog poop around the house and the exterior. I can't tell you how many people step in that, and now you've got it in the house.
Yep.
Some real basic things. I've actually seen people walk away from a house because it was so untidy. It gave them just bad vibes. After going all through, they went through. Clothes are all over. Sometimes we find personal clothes hanging in bathtubs, and we actually run water in the bathtubs. And we want to run the shower. You got to move the bras and all the stuff, and just make it easier so things can flow. But I can give you a whole lot more on that. But
well, and remember, because also it's like your buyer, maybe you didn't get a chance to get into a certain room that something was in, or you couldn't test a certain system. And now the buyer's hesitant. It's like,
absolutely.
Well, I don't know. And now there's negotiation. Do you have a holdback? Do we come back and test it? You want clarity for your clients. You want clarity for the buyer.
Absolutely.
You want to make sure that this stuff is looked after, and
that's so true.
For the seller's perspective, because you don't want the deal to fall through.
That's right.
So giving the buyer as much clarity as possible, I think, is absolutely the best course of action.
It seems like they will, that doubt in them is sometimes the very thing that prevents them from going to the next step. And it comes up regularly. They want to see the very thing they can't. And I get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not going to bust the door open, right? So.
Yeah. Floyd, fantastic information. Thank you so much for coming in. Floyd, with A to Z Home Inspections, feel free to give him a call, touch base, Google if he's on the preferred supplier list.
Which you can find at crrealty.ca, and then there is a link to our preferred suppliers.
It's also on our virtual office.
And it's on our virtual office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We're going to be right back. We're going to chat with you guys a little bit about some farming strategies you can use.